El Salvador's $17 billion Bitcoin city. Imagine a futuristic smart city with no taxes, zero emissions, completely powered by renewable energy, and it's all in the shape of one giant Bitcoin. I know it all sounds a little bit crazy, and some of you might actually think this is a joke. But make no mistake, this mega project is very much a real thing, and it's going to be built right here at the base of a literal volcano. But of all places, why the heck are they building it here? And what does Bitcoin have to do with any of this? Hi, I'm Regis, and this is El Salvador's controversial Bitcoin city. Before we can talk about this insane mega project, we first have to understand why it's being built in the first place. This is El Salvador, a fairly small country located in Central America with a population of just over 6.3 million people. In terms of its economy, well, it isn't exactly the richest country on earth. After decades of civil war, political unrest, corruption, and mismanagement, El Salvador has struggled to improve its economy and the well-being of its citizens. In fact, as many as 28% of Salvadorians live below the poverty line, while an additional 40% of the entire population are classified as at risk of falling into poverty. However, these figures alone don't paint the entire picture of Salvadorian society. Partly as a result of this huge wealth inequality and instability, the country's actually had a huge problem when it comes to gang-related violence and murder. El Salvador has consistently been among the top countries in the world with the highest rates of homicide. At its peak back in 2015, as many as 18 Salvadorians were being murdered each day. This makes the country one of the most dangerous places in the world, with more death compared to even places that are quite literally active war zones. This, in turn, made it harder for businesses, both foreign and local, to find success within the country. Day-to-day life became extremely difficult, which led to more unemployment and a poorer quality of life. But looking at the El Salvador of today, things are very much different. This is a graph of El Salvador's homicide rate over the past 10 years. Notably, the country has seen a steady decrease each year, even reaching a record low in more than 3 decades. And although issues such as high rates of unemployment, poverty, and wealth inequality are still very much real problems to this day, the country is definitely headed in the right direction. So how did all of this happen? How did one of the most violent and dangerous countries on earth suddenly become one of the safest countries in its region? Well, it's all thanks to one person. This is Nayib Bukele, the current and youngest ever president of El Salvador, who was only 37 years old when he was inaugurated. Bukele quickly rose into prominence after a popular campaign for the presidency back in 2019, where he branded himself as a young and up-and-coming independent politician who rejected the way in which previous administrations had run the country. This is a gross oversimplification, but at the time, Salvadorians were simply just tired of the same two political parties winning the elections again and again and again, yet never actually improving the quality of life in the country. And so, when Bukele, an extremely popular candidate who wasn't part of either major party, came into the presidential race promising meaningful change, the stage was set for his victory. Nayib Bukele was inaugurated as president of El Salvador in June 2019 after winning more than 50% of the votes. His victory marked the end of a 30-year streak of presidents only coming from the two biggest political parties. During his term, Bukele made some serious changes to the way that El Salvador was run. One of his most controversial moves was enacting a state of emergency back in 2022 that essentially gave power to the police to arrest anyone who was suspected to be members of a gang. Almost 88,000 people have now been detained since then. This has made El Salvador by far the country with the highest incarceration rate in the world. They've even recently built one of the largest prisons in the world to accommodate the huge amount of inmates. El Salvador has now become one of the safest countries in Central America, and both tourism and foreign investment are now steadily on the rise. But let's get back to the main topic of this video and talk about another controversial policy that Bukele has enacted in the country. In June 2021, El Salvador made headlines when it became the very first country in the world to adopt a cryptocurrency as one of its legal tenders. Along with the US dollar, which has been the country's only currency since 2001, Bitcoin will now be considered a legitimate way to pay for any and all goods and services in the country. According to Bukele himself, This legislation was passed as a means to bring financial inclusion, investment, tourism, innovation, and economic development to the country. With as many as 70% of all Salvadorians not having a bank account, this new policy aims to bring financial services and financial literacy to the average citizen. Through the Bitcoin law, the country would also be using public funds to purchase Bitcoins as a form of investment. A total of 400 Bitcoins were bought by El Salvador the day before the law took effect. This cost the country almost $21 million at the time. Although the motivations behind passing the law seem to be reasonable enough, the results and reactions to this implementation are mixed at best. For one, the International Monetary Fund demanded El Salvador reverse their adoption of the cryptocurrency, saying that there are large risks associated with the use of Bitcoin on financial stability, financial integrity, and consumer protection. In simpler terms, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are simply too volatile to be putting government funds into. Salvadorians themselves seem to be largely indifferent, if not outright disagreeing with the change, with as much as 70% of the population showing some distrust toward the country's adoption of Bitcoin. Even the dedicated app called Chivo, which El Salvador developed for Bitcoin adoption, has largely been underused by the population despite a free $30 sign-up bonus. But despite all the uncertainty surrounding Bitcoin and its implications on a national level, Bukele seems not to be afraid at all about doubling down on his crypto dreams. Now time to talk about Bitcoin City. Bitcoin City is a massive smart city that will be located in the southeastern region of El Salvador known as La Union. Not much is actually known about this city, but what we do know is that it will be in the shape of a giant circle, or a giant Bitcoin, considering the huge logo in the middle. What a creative idea, am I right? It'll have everything a normal city would typically have, including its own airport. And according to Bukele, all of this will be devoted to Bitcoin. We aren't really sure what exactly that means, but it probably means that the use of Bitcoin will be a huge selling point for the development, with most, if not all, transactions in the city being done through the digital currency. To entice potential investors, the city will also be a tax haven, meaning that there will be no income, property, procurement, and city taxes that will be collected from its residents and businesses. The only tax that will be in place in Bitcoin City will be VAT, which will then be used for the payment of bonds and the maintenance of the city. So this place would become a huge tax haven, with both residents and businesses pretty much paying no taxes at all. Additionally, the government is also offering an easy path to citizenship for foreigners who would be willing to invest or donate Bitcoin into the project. Remember how we said at the start of this video that the city is going to be built right beside a volcano? Well, there's actually a reason for that. Bitcoin City will entirely be powered by geothermal energy, taking advantage of the nearby Conchagua volcano, thereby making the entire thing run completely on clean and renewable energy. But despite its benefits, geothermal energy on its own is known to have very high upfront costs, and the size of this mega project is actually pretty big considering what we know so far. Bukele himself even revealed that the whole Bitcoin City project would cost as many as 300,000 Bitcoins to complete, which at the time of announcement would have been the equivalent of more than $17 billion. So how exactly is El Salvador planning to fund this city's construction? 2 words, volcano bonds. Yeah, I know, but I'm not kidding. The government will be selling a total of $1 billion worth of bonds, half of which will be invested into Bitcoin. The other half will then be used for the construction of the city itself as well as the creation of Bitcoin mines. The idea behind it is that if the price of Bitcoin were to increase in the future, the mined crypto could then be used to pay off the bonds themselves and purchase more Bitcoins to fund the project even further. That seems like an optimistic plan, considering that the whole project is expected to cost around $17 billion. In fact, El Salvador has actually already started this model of Bitcoin mining in a completely different volcano located in the middle of the country, and as of 2024, this project has already netted the country a total of 474 Bitcoins, which are worth somewhere around $30 million. And with El Salvador being one of the leading users of geothermal energy in the world, it could theoretically be possible for them to increase their mining capacity, all while using clean and renewable energy. But now, more than 2 years after Bukele announced Bitcoin City, what exactly have they already built? And how has the country's Bitcoin investment turned out? After all this time, there's been little mention of construction progress on the project ever since it was first announced back in November 2021. So far, what we do know is that the main city itself still hasn't broken ground. This could likely be attributed to the fact that the price of Bitcoin significantly crashed immediately after the project was unveiled. This has, of course, raised some serious doubts about whether the city was actually going to be built in the first place. The only news of any progress whatsoever that we have right now is related to the airport that will serve the future megaproject as well as the nearby municipality of Conchagua. Bitcoin City Airport began construction back in March 2023, with preliminary terraforming work being done on the site. The so-called volcano bonds, which were supposed to be issued back in 2022 and finance the project's construction, still have not been released as of this video. And despite it already receiving approval from the government, there still hasn't been any news at all surrounding when exactly this project is going to be carried out. But despite all these setbacks and uncertainty, there seems to be a glimmer of hope for Bukele's Bitcoin dream. The price of Bitcoin has actually reached a new all-time high over the past few months, meaning that all of the cryptocurrency El Salvador has been mining and saving up all this time has actually now started to turn a significant unrealized profit. As of July 2024, the value of the country's Bitcoin reserves is now worth at least $55 million more compared to their initial price. But to be honest, $55 million isn't actually all that much money for an entire country if you think about it. So what happens now? No matter which side of the argument you're on, it's undeniable that El Salvador took a huge risk with their Bitcoin investments. And with Bukele just recently being re-elected president back in February 2024, it's safe to assume that Bitcoin and El Salvador will continue to be synonymous with each other over the coming years. With the country now turning a profit on their investments, it wouldn't be too crazy to think that we're going to now start hearing more news about Bitcoin City. As for whether or not it'll be completed in the near future, well, only time will tell. What do you think about El Salvador's Bitcoin gamble? Do you think other countries should follow in their footsteps? Let us know in the comments down below. If you want to see more mega projects from Central America, you should watch our video about Mexico's Panama Canal rival. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next video.